All the assets that go into this NAC then have to be managed for sustainably. And the way they explain that is they say that nothing can happen on the land that isn't replenishable. So immediately, no mining, no oil and gas. All of the other uses are going to be eventually stopped on this land, on the assets that are in there. The other thing the SEC rule does, which I think is extremely dangerous, and there needs to be oversight into what they're doing, but they are giving management authority to the NAC to manage these assets. So the question comes up, how can a NAC have management authority over our national parks? There's some really major constitutional questions at play here that nobody from the SEC, the IEG, or the New York Stock Exchange have disclosed how that's going to work. Nor have they disclosed how they have the authority to assume that authority, that management authority. So now, but let's say that they accomplish this, and that means all of those assets that are owned by that NAC are going to be managed by the investors. So if China's sovereign wealth fund is one of the major investors, that means China is going to be managing what happens on these assets in America through the NACs. And, I think it'd be a smart play on their part to come in and try to invest in as many of these as they can, keep our assets from being developed so that they, of course, can continue to grow in their power. And while they keep tamping down America, such a dangerous proposal for national security, not only property rights, but national security, that it really is frightening.
Well, you were on a webinar that Frank Gaffney sponsored for the Security for National Policy, I believe. And I highly recommend everyone go to that website and look at that entire webinar. It's an hour and a half, and it'll be the best hour and a half you can spend, because Margaret and her colleagues outline really every aspect of the problems with this, and they do it in depth that we don't have the time to go into here today. But Margaret, what's the timeline for this? This is something they put into the Federal Register, and I took the trouble to go onto the Federal Register and look at this, and I see that October 4th was when this showed up, and there was no announcement. There was no attempt to bring people's attention to it, because they really did not want people to reading about it. They've got a biodiversity policy, a human rights policy, an equitable benefit sharing policy. The details of this are quite gory if you care about human freedom and property rights. How can we stop this?
Initially, they only allowed a 21-day comment period. So they officially published it on October 4th, allowed 21 days of public comment with no public announcement, obviously. They really were trying to get this done quickly and quietly. The SEC was going to make its decision to approve or disapprove or continue to investigate on November 18th. And I fully believe they had intended to get this done, but fortunately, we were able to get enough attention on it that SEC stepped back. They did not reopen comments in their first decision, in their first extension. They only extended their decision-making time. That date was January 2nd. In between all of that was when we were able to really get a lot of good people to take a deep look at this and sound the alarm. Utah Treasurer Marlo Oaks has been phenomenal. As soon as he started looking into this, he had the same concerns, and he wrote an op-ed that came out in the Wall Street Journal. Representative Harriet Hagman from Wyoming, she gets this at a very deep level because she's been watching this for a lot of years as well. And she immediately rallied her colleagues, and they sent a letter off to SEC signed by 31 members that requested them to reopen the comment period. And then Treasurer Oaks was able to get 23 financial officers across the nation to sign a letter requesting the same thing. And so that really put enough pressure on him that they had to really do something. So they did extend comments. They reopened the comment period, which closes January 18th. So our deadline's coming up pretty quick. I highly recommend that people comment. and make as substantive as you can in the record, or simply even if you just register your opposition. That pressure, just the exposure of people.
If you get 3 commissioners approving it, then it goes into
Yeah,
effect. That's a pretty small portion of our democracy.
it is. And it's even worse than that. That's only if the commissioners, it will take one commissioner to say, we want a public hearing. Otherwise, this is going to be administratively approved. In other words, the staff at SEC can get this approved unless the commissioners step in and say, wait a minute.
The thing that we need to keep in mind is that Biden from day one, and everybody behind Biden, has had a whole of government agenda. Every single agency of the government has been weaponized to bring about their DEI agenda and the climate agenda. And the SEC, I mean, if you, I live in the DC area, and you look at the number of people in the federal government who voted for Joe Biden, it was probably 95%. And so the employees and the lawyers in the SEC have a natural inclination and bias towards approving this sort of thing. It's those of us that are outside the Beltway that really can see the dangers and want to stop it, which is all the more reason that we need to get in and just fill their email inbox with reasons why this is a terrible idea. And my view would be we ought to start singling out people like Gary Gensler and make him the poster boy for this, because it's a tactic which often works. It worked with Larry Fink at BlackRock with his ESG agenda. This is one of the ways we can stop this.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I even think the New York Stock Exchange should be contacted on this as well, because they have a board position on this in this company.
Well, this is really interesting. I'm sorry, this is my world.
Yeah.
I used to run a company that was on the New York Stock Exchange. New York Stock Exchange owns a piece of this company.
Yes.
So they're not only the exchange that's handling trading its security, but they have a stake in its upside.
Conflict of interest. That is really a serious position that they've taken. So I think they ought to be contacted. Additionally, let me tell you another group that has been very disappointing, and that's the House Financial Services Committee. They have oversight over the SEC, and we understand they were briefed by New York Stock Exchange and IEG, and therefore took the position that they would not weigh in on this issue.
Who chairs that committee?
McHenry, Patrick McHenry. And that's one of the reasons why it was so important that a freshman member, Representative Hagman, stepped in and organized her colleagues to oppose this, because the committee that has the authority and responsibility to do this is standing down on this. Now, not every member is doing that. There are 3 members on that committee that signed the letter with Harriet Hagman. But I think that's another group. I think every member of the Financial Services Committee should have to publicly come out and make a statement on whether they support or disapprove of NACs. I think they owe it to the American people, because they have been in a position to stop this, and they have taken no action to do so. As you can tell, I'm a little bit irritated about that position.
You should, as am I. But this is one of these issues that is unique in a way, because often we find ourselves complaining about something that's already been done. This is something we can stop before it happens.
Yes.
And they were deliberately trying to sneak this thing through without any kind of scrutiny. And because you and I are talking about this, and because a lot of other people are, we may be able to get a public outcry against it. And it's hard to overstate the magnitude of damage this could do, but I think that helps us in getting this stopped.
Yes, it absolutely does. It absolutely does.